Hi, I'm Boone. Welcome to BuddyPress 1.8. Holy mackerel. I am Boone. Hold on. I am Boone. I am one of the lead developers for BuddyPress. I live in Queens, not on Mars, despite what you may see in this picture. Although you can't really see the picture that well, so that joke pretty much died. Whatever. That was my only joke, so hope you laughed it up. I'm a freelance developer and a consultant. I mostly work with universities and schools in the New York area and around the country, but I work with a lot of CUNY schools in particular. I came out of the CUNY system as an academic, not that you care. I'm a free software weirdo, which means that I believe in free software in the freedom sense. All right. So I'm here to talk about BuddyPress. I'm here on the occasion of BuddyPress 1.8, but I know that some of you may not be familiar with BuddyPress, so we'll just do a quick background for BuddyPress. How many of you don't know what BuddyPress is? Don't know. Okay, good. So one. And how many of you have never used BuddyPress? Okay, good number of you. Good. Awesome. So what is BuddyPress? Well, basically, this picture sums it up. BuddyPress is about being friends forever with the other people on your website. It's a social add-on for WordPress. It's a plugin that adds social features. What kinds of social features? Well, here's the list, which is a little bit boring. Profiles, groups, activity, forums, private messaging, friends. All of these are sort of individual components that can be turned on and off and can be customized in different ways. The best way to really get a sense for what BuddyPress is to see what it can do in action. So let's just look at a quick example. This is a favorite of mine because this is a project that I've been working on lately. It's the CityTech Open Lab. So CityTech is you probably all know, it's a school downtown Brooklyn. So CityTech Open Lab is a website. It's a kind of a community network for the CityTech community. Well, that may not work. That stinks. Hold on a sec. Okay, I'll just show you the local version that I have on here. So this is really not beautiful at all, but this is a local version I have with a bunch of broken avatars and probably a lot of swear words because I get frustrated when I do this stuff. So the way that Open Lab is set up is that it's very group-centric. So one of the big features of BuddyPress is that you have these very customizable groups. Now groups is basically just a wrapper for a bunch of members, and then we have a lot of different functionality that we can plug into groups. So they've organized their groups into a couple sections. They have projects, clubs, portfolios, courses. Each of those is a different kind of group. Inside of a group, you can have a bunch of different things going on. You can have a blog that's linked to this group. So in the case of a course, you might have all of the students, let's say, writing a weekly post on a public blog on whatever the topic of their course is. Let's say architecture, right? That you can have internal site discussions. You can have forum posts using BuddyPress. You can have shared upload spaces. That's what Docs is. You can have or files. You can have shared collaborative document spaces, kind of like Google Docs. So this is basically within the context of groups. So it works really well for courses in this sense. But groups are a really flexible feature that can be used in all sorts of different ways. You know, you may have a website where groups represents, let's say, companies. And inside of the companies, you might have people who are, let's say, fans of the company joining as members of the groups. Or you may have people who are employees of the company sort of as members of the groups. And then you would sort of organize and design your site around those concepts. So groups is a really sort of general tool that can do a lot of really awesome stuff. Another big feature of BuddyPress is that it has member profiles. Now again, because this is a test site, I'm going to have a lot of people like, well, here's my profile, I guess. You can see my academic interests are lorem ipsum dolor sit emet. That's not really me. Long story. If you grew up in the 80s, maybe you know who that is. We can talk about it later. So BuddyPress has these customizable user profiles. What this means is that, you know, as Paul was saying before, WordPress doesn't really have the concept of user profiles so much. I mean, we can go to WP admin / my profile or whatever it is, and you'll be able to fill in some basic information about yourself. But this is not so much meant for public display. BuddyPress is all about giving a public face, a profile page for the user, like you would have on, let's say, Facebook. And the fields here, you can see for the Open Lab, they've got things like title and department and office and academic interests. Now those make sense for an academic community. Those are totally customizable by the admin. So you could put in whatever kinds of fields are appropriate for your community. If you have a community about dogs, you might have favorite breed, favorite brand of flea comb, stuff like that. Great, so profiles. Here we have another feature of BuddyPress. And there are a number of other, we have friendship connections. You can see friends over there on the right. This harkens back to that slide earlier about teddy bears. Yeah, great. So the way that I kind of like to summarize BuddyPress for people who haven't used it before is that WordPress is really primarily about content. It's a content management system. It's about writing your content, whether it's blog posts or whether it's pages or whether it's products, and then presenting those. Whereas BuddyPress is really about people first. It's organized around the concept of individuals and the groups that those individuals are a part of. Now, of course, you have content inside of BuddyPress, but people really come first, and the content is organized around the people instead of the other way around. So BuddyPress is really powerful for that kind of stuff. As a developer, and how many of you in this room would call yourselves developers? You're building sites using WordPress. Great, so a good number of you. As a developer, the pitch that I like to give is that BuddyPress is kind of like a library of social tools. With a little bit of, out of the box, as a regular user, if you install BuddyPress, you get a nice community. But if you're a developer and you put a little bit of elbow grease into it, you can take these basic tools and you can make some really amazing customized things. So that's a little bit about BuddyPress. BuddyPress 1.8. BuddyPress 1.8 is totally money. Let's talk about some of the features. Now, for those of you who haven't used BuddyPress before, maybe doing a list of what's new in BuddyPress 1.8 may not make a ton of sense. So I'll try to give you a little history and some explanation of why some of these things are interesting or valuable. So the first thing that's big in BuddyPress 1.8 is what we call de-theming. So in BuddyPress 1.7, our previous big version, the big headline feature was that you no longer needed to have a specific BuddyPress theme in order to use BuddyPress. You could use any WordPress theme. You could use 2012. You could use 2013. You could use, you could use a Woo theme. You could use anything, and it would just sort of automatically work. Now, our first implementation of that in BuddyPress 1.7 was pretty good. But basically what we did is we took all of the templates out of our old default theme and we kind of slipped them into your theme. That probably didn't come out quite the right way. But we put them into your theme. And it still sort of maintained the look and feel of the old BP default theme. So what we did in 1.8 is we stripped out a bunch of that styling in order to make it blend in a little bit better with the native qualities of your theme. So here's a couple of little examples. And we can't see that well because it's a little bit small. But on the left, you have BuddyPress 1.7. And you can see the comments buttons. This is using 2012. You have the comment buttons are rounded in a certain way. The fonts show up in a certain way. There's fading on the buttons in a way that really doesn't match the theme at all. And that's largely because we had done a lot of styling in order to make this look good in BuddyPress default. And when we ported it over to any theme, we kept a lot of that styling in there because it had to look like something. We worked hard in BuddyPress 1.8 to pull a lot of that out. So what you're seeing over here on the right these are button styles that are inherited directly from your theme. So in other words, it doesn't look like these things are out of place. You'd see this looks much more like a BuddyPress, or much more like the part of the 2012 theme. So here's another example. This is 2010. So a different sort of set of typographic rules, and the font element or the form elements are styled differently and stuff. So again, on the left, look at the comments button when I flip back and forth between the two 1.7s. They're exactly the same. Like I said, it looked the same in every single theme. But what we did, again, in 2020 or in 1.8, is that we're inheriting these styles a little bit better from the parent theme. So again, yeah, please.
I don't mean to interrupt,
but you will anyway, so yeah. Yeah.
That being said, and I saw you mention this in a previous presentation, is it possible for me as the theme developer to say, okay, I know you're trying to be, let's say, more theme-friendly natively.
Yep.
But what do I need to do to like supersede you?
What do you need to do to supersede us? Well, it's to build a BuddyPress theme. And so just use CSS like you normally would. I'm going to talk a little bit later when I start talking about some of the new theming features about ways that we are trying to make it easier for theme developers to customize in a more fine-grained way. But basically, I mean, look, this is just CSS. Or on the right, what you're seeing is more of a tasteful lack of CSS. We've pulled out certain kinds of CSS so that we inherit it better. But you can just override that with your own style.css or your own style sheets. Yeah, absolutely. This particular example is CSS. Some of the later ones aren't necessarily. So here's another kind of example. On the left, you see, this is back to 2012. And we had all this sort of like funny box shadow inside of the text area. And we had all these like rounded corners and stuff that weren't appropriate in every single theme. Again, we've taken them out so your elements match a little bit better. Is this super exciting? No. But what it does do is it sort of, it's just that little bit of extra polish that it doesn't immediately look like you have, oh, that's using BuddyPress default or whatever people's reactions to that sort of thing is. Like barf or whatever. OK. So that's de-theming. That was one of the big things we did in 1.8. Next thing, template hierarchy. So how many of you have built WordPress themes or modified WordPress themes? How many of you have used the template hierarchy in WordPress? Good. So a brief summary of how template hierarchy works is that in theory, you could have a WordPress theme with one single PHP file, one template. And that would load, all of the content on your entire site would load with that one single template. But that's not very customizable, right? A lot of times you want your pages to look different from your posts, and you want author archives to look different from category archives, and so on and so forth. So WordPress has this concept of template hierarchy. And the way that it works is that depending on the kind of content you're looking at, whether it's an author page, or whether it's a single post, or whether it's a post in a certain category, or whatever, WordPress is going to go through a set of rules that says, well, first I'm going to look for this kind of template that has this name. If I find it, I'll use it. If not, I'm going to fall back to one that's a little bit more general, and so on and so forth. And so if you've ever looked at this page on the codex, the WordPress codex template hierarchy, you'll see there is an enormous flowchart diagram that tells you, if you want to display this kind of content, use this. Otherwise, it will fall back on this, and it's this big fancy tree. Now, we are introducing this into BuddyPress little by little, because just like on a WordPress site, there might be cases where you want, let's say, a specific member of your site, or a specific kind of member of your site, to have a very different looking profile page. Or you might have an example, let's say group directories maybe should look very different from member directories. So here's an example of how that works. So on the left here, I'm using the default template. And here we're talking about the top level template. I don't want to get too much into the gory details of how BuddyPress works in every theme. But basically, we use regular WordPress templates when they're available. And we swap out the content, _content, with the BuddyPress content. Now, so I'm using page.php, the regular page.php from the theme. That's what will happen by default if you just install BuddyPress on top of a regular theme. And you see it has a sidebar because my theme has a sidebar. And it has my header and footer and all of that content. And then BuddyPress stuff loads over on the left-hand side. Now, let's say that I have a very special member on my site. Let's say a rock and roll legend and superstar, and just one of the hippest guys around. And I wanted to, and he had a profile page on my site, and I wanted it to be extra special. Let's say I wanted to take out the sidebar. Let's say I wanted to put in huge letters at the top of that template, Huey's Crib. Well, I can do that. And I do that by dropping in a custom template at the specified place in the template hierarchy. So here we have, it's in your theme, you'd go to a BuddyPress directory, members, single, and then you name it in a special way. Index, nice name, Huey, because Huey is the name of this particular user. So again, this is one single example, and maybe it's not the best example, although if Huey Lewis is on your BuddyPress site, I mean, you pretty much got it all figured out already, so what are you even doing here? But we have a lot of different kinds of customizations that you can do in this sort of way. So if you want to remove the sidebar or have a different header on, let's say, group directory pages, there's a simple way to do that using a drop-in, a special naming convention that's all described in detail on the codex. So there's lots more about that on the codex, if you are curious. That's the BuddyPress codex. automated testing. How many of you have ever written unit tests? Woo, woo, woo. Automated tests are a way for, we're getting kind of towards the geekier end of the scale here. So automated tests are a way for developers to sort of write a series of tests that can then be run automatically. Let's say every time they type a command at the command line, or every time they, let's say, push to a remote repository. It'll run this whole series of tests automatically to make sure that nothing has broken since the last time the tests have run. So, if you think about when you're, let's say, modifying CSS in a theme, you modify a line and you like refresh your browser, and it fixes that little thing, but by changing the padding there, you could have screwed something up on another page, right? I mean, it sucks, right? Automated testing is supposed to prevent this sort of thing, not necessarily with CSS, but with more like, logic-oriented stuff in PHP and stuff like that. So, in version 1.8, we introduced an automated testing suite into BuddyPress, and it has a bunch of really awesome features. So the first is that it uses WordPress Test Suite. So WordPress has its own automated testing suite with unit tests and integration tests, and it has a whole bunch of really handy classes for data factories, for like creating fake data and stuff like that. I mean, if you've never done it, you don't necessarily need to know the details, but it has a lot of great tools. And one of the prerequisites for BuddyPress automated tests is that we wanted to have those same tools. So we're using their tests. And so when BuddyPress has access to those tools, and likewise, if you want to, if you're going to use, we have built it in such a way that you can use it in your own plugins. So if you have a plugin for BuddyPress, I have many of them. Go figure. So if you have a BuddyPress plugin and you want to write automated tests for it, you can use the tools that we've built in for the BuddyPress testing suite, which in turn use the tools that are built in for the WordPress testing suite. So with just a few lines of code, your plugin can write unit tests that bring in all of the BuddyPress and WordPress tools. So it's a very slick sort of setup. We have Travis CI integration, so if none of you have ever written unit tests, maybe you don't know what that is, but basically it's like a robot that lives somewhere that tests all your code every time you push it to GitHub. So it's awesome. I mean, we all want robots. That's why Roombas are so popular on Woot. OK. So it's available only in the Subversion checkout. If you download the plugin BuddyPress from the WordPress repository, you're not going to get the tests. We don't include them in the distribution version. But if you check it out from SVN, you will get it. And there's much more information on the codex. I'm rushing through this one because I see that this is not the most exciting thing in the world for you guys. OK. Meta queries. This one is a little bit more exciting, even though it's not really that sexily named. And here's code, so now it's really terrifying, right? So how many people have used WP query before? Good. How many people have used the meta query argument in WP query? Good. So what this lets you do, and how many people love using the meta query argument? I see you in the back, yeah. What meta? Okay. In WordPress, posts have metadata attached to them. Metadata is just arbitrary data that that WordPress attaches to a post, or that a plugin can attach to a post, and it exists in a sort of a key value data status store. I mean, it just exists in a database table, and sometimes you want to limit the results of your query based on that metadata. You want to say, I only want to return posts that that have a short URL associated with them, which would be stored in metadata. So you would use the meta query argument for WP query. Really nifty. Now, in BuddyPress 1.8, we introduced a meta query argument for our group template functions, as well as our activity template functions. So just like you have WP query, we also have functions in BuddyPress to get a list of groups. So if you want to get all the groups to show in a directory, we have a function called BP has groups. Now, if you can pass in a meta query argument, so this one happens to be total member count, and the number has to be in 5, 6, or 7. This will then return all of the groups that have either 5, 6, or 7 members in the group. Admittedly, probably not the most useful meta query that you would ever do, but this sort of gives you an idea if you're using a lot of plugins that use group meta, and you want to be able to filter in fancy ways by this, you can do it. And we're using the exact same code for this. We're using the WP meta query class that WordPress uses. So it's the same syntax that you're used to, and it has all the same bells and whistles. Yeah, BP has activities, has it too. It's totally bitchin'. OK. Next. Group extension API rewrite. So how many of you have developed a BuddyPress plugin before? Nobody. How many of you have used the BuddyPress group extension before and a customization for a site? Okay. Well, let me show you really quickly what it does. It's awesome. BuddyPress has these groups, like I was trying to show you before, but I didn't have internet. But it has these groups, and we have a little API that lets you as a developer, or that lets plugins in the repository, let's say, add a new tab to that group. And it can do a bunch of fancy stuff. So I wrote a small plugin today called Crackers. And you can see up on the upper left, this is the main thing that it does. It adds a tab called Crackers to each group, and then it has a list of 3 kinds of great crackers: Ritz, Triscuit, and Chicken and a Biscuit. Which rhymes. I didn't even think of that until I just said it out loud, so I'm on a roll. Then you have these other sort of areas of BuddyPress where group plugins sort of integrate into the BuddyPress interface. So you have, for instance, when you're on the admin screen, we call this the edit mode. We have a crackers tab, and I'm able to select, does this group have crackers? Yes or no. Likewise, when you're creating a group, you can add a step to the group creation process that asks whether this group has crackers. Then in the dashboard, there's an area where administrators can go through and they can manage groups from the dashboard. Groups can also register a setting on that page. So it used to be, before BuddyPress 1.8, that you had to do all of this stuff separately. And in order to do this, you'd have to write huge amounts of code. And it would be a pain. Each one of them was a little bit different from each other, and it was a big pain in the butt to maintain. Now they have all been combined with full backward compatibility, so that in order to do all of this stuff right here, you only need really a couple lines of code. So this is, again, I know most of you aren't coders, so we don't actually have to look at the details here. But the point is that settings screen creates the drop-down menu and the sort of, do you have any crackers in this group, that text. And then settings screen save is what is responsible for handling the form submit. After you click save, that's it. If you do this in your plugin, that's going to create all 3 edit, create, and admin. It's possible to make them customized so that they're different from each other, but by default, they'll all be handled by the same set of methods. So you're all going to have to take my word for it, since none of you bunch of slackers, have built a BuddyPress plugin before. But take my word for it that it is the shiz, and it is so much better than the way that it used to be. So it's awesome. What's next? What are we doing right now? Well, we got some cool things coming for BuddyPress 1.9. A lot of these are tentative at the moment, but they're kind of in the pipeline. First is a new set of templates. So like I told you before, the existing BuddyPress templates that we have in there right now were inherited from BP default, the old BuddyPress default theme. And the BuddyPress default theme was originally written in like 2010, something like that. So these templates are a couple of years old. I mean, they've been fixed and they've been fine-tuned, but the basic metaphors, visual metaphors, and elements that we use to describe BuddyPress content haven't really changed very much since then. For 1.9, we've got a team, a crack team, I might say, working on a brand new set of templates, built really from the ground up. And they're reorganizing the way that they look, and they're making groups look a little different from profiles so that you have a little bit more visual separation on your site. They're doing some awesome things. Those are going to be available for use in BuddyPress 1.9. It's going to be sweet. We're doing some big work on performance. Right now, BuddyPress is a challenge to cache because it's so the content is constantly changing. Unlike a WordPress blog post where you write it and then it basically stays the same from here through eternity. Your BuddyPress activity page changes every time one of your friends posts an update, right? It changes all the time. So it's a little bit harder to cache. But we're working on some tricks in order to cache some of this stuff so that over the next few versions, you're going to see big improvements. The last active thing, I'm not even going to bother you with the details, but it's going to be pretty sweet again. WP rewrites, right now we have this whole custom built-in system so that when you go to, let's say, well, let me go to a page, members directory. This is it's a little bit ugly the way that it works now, so here's a BuddyPress installation. When you go to boone.cool/wpmaster/members/user_1_319, in order to turn that URL, in order for BuddyPress to say, oh, this is a member, there is a whole bunch of ugly crap that happens. And then we say, oh, you're looking for member user 1319 or whatever. In BuddyPress 1.9, we're going to rip all that crap out, and we're going to use the WordPress rewrites API, which is when you go into the dashboard and settings and permalink, and you choose a pretty permalink setting, we're going to be tapping into that same logic so that it's going to make it faster, it's going to make it easier to test, it's going to make it easier to customize, so that let's say you don't want to talk about members. Let's say you want to have, you want it to be, your community to be, instead of members, you want to call them users, or you want to call them students, or you want to call them clients, or whatever. It's going to be way easier to do that in the next version of BuddyPress because we're going to be using the WordPress rewrite API. Better activity comments thinking. So this is one that if you haven't used BuddyPress a lot, you might not be aware of, but we have this awesome activity stream that records everything that happens on the website. So if you post a new blog post, the activity stream gets updated. If you comment on a blog post, activity stream is updated. If you make a new friend, activity stream updated. But some of these, we have inline commenting on these activity streams. So if you like update your profile picture, I could say, "Damn, son, you're looking good," or whatever, right? But I wouldn't say that. Although you all look really good. But in the case of forum posts, let's say, there was a little bit of confusion because you would leave a comment on a forum post in the activity stream, yet that wouldn't necessarily be beamed back to the forum post itself. Likewise with blog comments. If you had an activity post about a blog post and then you posted a response to that in the activity stream, it wouldn't be synced back. We're fixing all that so to make for a slicker user interface or user experience for BuddyPress 1.9. And we're doing an overhaul of the codex. So we have a bunch of people who are taking our documentation, which is incomplete and is a little bit messy. And they're doing a reorganization of it. They're leading a refresh of various parts of the codex. And it's going to be really exciting. I think one of the things that people say when they come to BuddyPress is, "I wish there was more documentation." And part of that is just that documentation is a team effort. You should pitch in and help make documentation. But part of it is that it's just what's there isn't as organized as well as it could be. And that is getting overhauled for 1.9. So we're really excited about that too. That's it. Questions, comments, compliments? Steve.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Can you use the BuddyPress unit testing functions that you wrote on a non-BuddyPress plugin, and would there be a benefit to that?
There would be, yes, you can do it, but there would be no benefit. The main things that we add, so let me just give you there's a couple of goodies that we give you in the BuddyPress suite that sits on top of the WordPress suite. And they all have to do with BuddyPress specific stuff, obviously. So for instance, if you want to create some dummy groups, we have a factory method for that. So if your plugin extends the group functionality and you need to create some mock groups during your unit tests, you don't have to write that code yourself. You use BuddyPress's unit testing code in order to do that. For things like posts, you just use the WordPress unit test factory to create those. So like, for instance, BuddyPress Docs, plugin that I wrote. I need to be able to create groups in my unit tests, so I hook into the BuddyPress unit tests and I use that to create groups. I also need to be able to create posts because it's stored as a custom post type, and so I use that. There's also some other goodies that are BuddyPress specific, having to do with like refreshing URLs and stuff like that, and the way that we flush globals. I mean, it's kind of boring stuff. But basically, if your plugin doesn't run BuddyPress, doesn't need BuddyPress, or doesn't use BuddyPress, then there's no real benefit to using BuddyPress for that reason. Although you might look at the way that BuddyPress's unit test suite is structured, because we had to solve a lot of tricky problems having to do with, let's say, installing BuddyPress from scratch during the unit test setup process, and extending the factory methods and that kind of stuff that you might find helpful, you might find instructive as you build your own unit tests. And our Travis integration, I mean, that's another thing that's been helpful, because we had to figure out how to bootstrap WordPress and their unit tests, and then to pull in our own unit tests and to get that all running in a way that Travis would understand. So that's another place where it might be instructive for you to look at the BuddyPress unit tests. So yeah. Did you have another question?
I was actually trying to update our community site to still running BuddyPress forums, not BBPress.
Yep.
So I tried to update it to BBPress, and the function I was using was BP has forum topics and BP forum topics, which doesn't seem to be working anymore.
No, it's totally separate. Because now it uses BBPress stuff.
Right.
So whatever that is, it's BBP has topics, or BBP has replies, I think.
But relating those to the group that the topic is in, I was finding difficult. Maybe I just couldn't find that.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it off the top of my head. I think you pass like a forum ID parameter to it, and you have to get the forum ID by querying group meta or something along those lines. So this is a migration pain point. If you have custom templates for your forums, then you lose all those customizations when you move to the different version of BBPress. They're just not compatible with each other. So that's unfortunate. So any customizations that you've applied, you'll have to sort of get the new set of templates out of BuddyPress or BBPress or whoever supplies them, and then copy them over to your child theme and then do the same customizations again. So yeah. It's just
because a little bit of groups and a little bit of forums.
We've been extracting things and going with the small pieces loosely joined philosophy, so that BBPress sort of sits alongside BuddyPress and they kind of hook together in a way that is elegant from a sort of development point of view and from a maintenance point of view. But it sometimes means that when you're looking for, what template generates this particular piece of content, it's a little bit trickier to find because it's not one monolith. You have to go down this path. Is it in BuddyPress? No. Well, maybe it's in BBPress, or maybe it's provided over here. So that's sort of a trade-off. But yeah, if you're having issues, I recommend going to the BuddyPress support forums and seeing if anyone can help you with specific issues there. Yes, in the back, please.
I would like to set up CommentsPress and ZotPress for my students, but because the classes are large, less CUNY, I want to divide the students up into groups, and I'm wondering if BuddyPress works well with those other two plugins.
That's a great question. I know for a fact that CommentsPress has BuddyPress integration built into it. And the way that it works, I haven't actually played with this a lot myself, but the way that it works, I believe, is that individual CommentsPress powered blogs get associated with individual groups. So I'm not sure if that would match the sort of curricular goals that you have in mind here, because then a student, like this group's work would be totally separate from another group's work. But I think that's how that works. So CommentsPress, yes. And the developer I know, the person who's maintaining CommentPress at the moment is really interested in BuddyPress and contributes to BuddyPress. So I know that the two are definitely intended to work together. You'll have to experiment a little bit. ZotPress is for Zotero, right? That I don't think has any BuddyPress integration built into it. I don't know how, I'm not even sure that ZotPress will allow you to sync with different user libraries on a single WordPress installation. I haven't looked at ZotPress in a long time. So that one I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for you there. It certainly could be modified to work with BuddyPress, but it would take a developer in order to do it. I don't know. I don't remember who wrote ZotPress. I know the people who write Zotero, and I know the people who write BuddyPress. I don't remember who wrote ZotPress. So that's kind of my half answer. But go for it. Use BuddyPress because it's pretty awesome, and it's a CUNY product. So I mean, I'm a product of CUNY. Just saying. Yes, up here in front, please.
I love BuddyPress. I'm running a social learning site with it right now. And that activity syncing thing is my biggest usability problem, so I'm thrilled you're fixing that.
Awesome.
So my question is, it's called BuddyPress. Is there a way to get study buddies, like a one-on-one situation? Is there any kind of plugin, or are you planning on that, like where people could find one person they study with?
Groups of two?
You could have groups of two, yeah.
That would be horrible to have.
I guess I'm not totally sure on so you want a tool for people to find each other, or a tool for people to, once they found each other, to work together?
Exactly.
Well, I think groups of two is the answer to the second question. I mean, because the great thing about groups is that they have all these pre-built tools for them, you know? They have things like BuddyPress docs. They have things like, you know, Dropbox type shared upload places. They have all these tools that are already ready-made. So a group of 2 does sound a little bit depressing, but I mean, you could change.
It's depressing from an administrator's point of view.
Well, why so?
Because there'll be so many groups.
Yeah, but BuddyPress, I mean, so from an administrator point of view, there's ways to look at all group activity at once. You have the activity stream, for instance, but if the groups are private, then they're not going to show up there, but then you can go to the activity panel on the dashboard, and as the administrator, you can see and filter all activity there. So I think this is a place where the activity stream is really powerful, because you have all of this activity happening all over your site in groups and blogs and wherever it's happening, and it's all aggregated into one single stream on the activity stream. And that can be filtered in various ways, as you know, show me only the recent blog posts, or show me only the recent group activity updates. And but you can use that as a sort of administrative tool, as somebody who is like looking to just see what's happening across many, many groups. An alternative is that you could use a plugin like BuddyPress Group Email Subscription, which would let you subscribe to email updates in each individual group, or if you wanted, a digest version of them. And so every day you would get an email with updates from every single group, and they'd be organized by group. And that would be another way to sort of passively keep tabs on what's happening. So I think groups are your answer. It's just a question of how you manage the administration of those groups. What we do have new in BuddyPress 1.8 that I didn't put up here is better group management tools for administrators. So from the dashboard, when you go inside to edit one of the groups, it's possible to add members directly to a group, remove them, promote them, and stuff like that, without having to send an invitation, say, hey, check your email, all that kind of stuff. You can just do all of that stuff manually. I think that kind of tool and the other dashboard tools are going to help you as the administrator to really get things in place so that students can then get to work. Yeah. Awesome. Yes, please.
Will users have the ability to create their own groups and limit them without even having to go through an admin, or just have an admin moderate their decision?
That's a great question. When you install BuddyPress, and so the default setting is that anybody can create a group. There's a checkbox in the settings of BuddyPress that lets you disable group creation for anybody except for administrators. So that's the other end of the spectrum. Okay. So out of the box, you can do either of those two. There is a plugin called something like BP Moderate Group Creation, or something creative like that, that gives you that middle option, where people would be able to, let's say, propose a group, and then it would kind of live in limbo until the administrator approved or denied that group. So really, it's very flexible. I mean, it really depends on the needs of your community. For some communities, it works really well to just open up group creation and to have people creating groups however they want. In some communities, they want it really locked down, and in some communities, it makes sense to sort of have a moderated approach.
Now, I'm new to BuddyPress. I didn't know about that plugin yet. How would I know about all those things? Is that all in the codex?
That's another good question, but I don't have as great of an answer for that one. So if you search for BuddyPress in the WordPress plugin repository, wordpress.org/plugins, extend/plugins, you'll find 500, 600 plugins. That's a lot. Yeah. Some of these are really good, and some of them really are BuddyPress plugins. They do really significant BuddyPress modifications. Some of them kind of don't really do much with BuddyPress at all, and the author of the plugin just kind of said it did. Yeah. Right? So it can be a little bit of a challenge. One technique is to ask. So you can go to, let's say, buddypress.org/support, our official sort of support forums, and if you look through some of the logs, and especially we have a section called Showcase, I think, or Show Off Your Site, something like that, where people have sort of posted, here's my site, here's what it does, and here's some of the tools that I've used to build it. So that's one sort of method. We also have blog posts on the buddypress.org blog, where people have described their setup. So let's say for an education site, what plugins did they choose to use and why? That's another way to find out good plugins for a particular use. Another different kind of way to get moderated BuddyPress plugins there is a plugin called, I'm not going to remember it. I can look it up after this. But it essentially gives you a moderated list of BuddyPress plugins in your dashboard. Instead of searching the word BuddyPress and seeing 500 plugins, it gives you only the 30 best ones. And so it makes it a lot easier to see, well, what are my real options for this? And then if you Google this problem, actually, many other people have asked similar sorts of questions. And there are lots of blog posts out there that have been written over the last few years. What are the best 25 BuddyPress plugins? Or what's the best BuddyPress plugin for groups? Or whatever your particular need is. Probably somebody out there in the great wild web has written about it, and there's good information to be found that way. So I know that's a lot of different kind of things to check, and it's kind of a sticky issue. It's true with WordPress plugins too. There's just so many WordPress plugins. It's hard to find the good ones. But I would try some of those techniques. Check out the forums, maybe do a little bit of Googling, and after we're done, I'll look up the name of that plugin for you that gives you the moderated list. Yes, please.
Sure. Is there anything in the hopper that you see integrating BuddyPress being a social base for your WordPress site with WebRTC?
With what?
WebRTC.
What is WebRTC?
Where right in the browser at peer-to-peer visual sharing. So a bunch of libraries. It's Google pretty much pioneering.
Yeah.
It's something that is getting a lot of momentum. I'm just wondering, not just BuddyPress, but anything lined up.
Well, that sounds awesome. I don't know of anybody who's doing work like that. I know that I know of some real-time work that's been done for BuddyPress. I know that there's a couple of chat systems that work pretty well with BuddyPress. So that's real-time, but obviously it's not like high fidelity, like audio or video. I don't know of anybody doing that kind of work, but it would be awesome to learn about it. Is it browser-based?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think that sounds like an awesome opportunity for something like BuddyPress. I would have to learn more about it to know exactly how it would interface with BuddyPress, because presumably you would want to be able to, let's say, click a single button to create like a hangout type of thing between members of a group, let's say. Or you would want to have like a buddy list of your friends. So you'd want to interface with BuddyPress in a couple of different ways, and I'd have to think through how that would work with the APIs they provide. But that's great. So WebRTC, it's called?
Yeah, it just seems like the perfect front end for that back end view.
That's great. I'm glad you brought it to my attention, so I'm definitely going to check that out. Cool. Yes, please. Or yes, here, anywhere.
Is there any theme frameworks you recommend that works well with BuddyPress? Because I'm using PageLine.
You're using PageLines?
Yeah, it's a little trouble.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of BuddyPress theming. I definitely don't use any theme frameworks for my own BuddyPress development. When I have to do themes, I say that kind of grudgingly. When I have to do themes, I usually will just build them from scratch.
They want to do, but the client, they want to have the dashboard. They want to,
oh, right.
They want to update everything.
Well, since BuddyPress 1.7, excuse me, BuddyPress should just work with any of the existing theme frameworks, at least insofar as the theme frameworks modify WordPress stuff. So like, when you look at a BuddyPress page, the header is the same header as from a WordPress page. So if you have, let's say, a dashboard panel for modifying the header from PageLines or Woo or whatever, that will work the same way in BuddyPress, because BuddyPress is just using WordPress templates. Now, as for the stuff that happens inside of the BuddyPress box, I don't know of anybody who's built framework type options for modifying the way that stuff looks and behaves. It would be a big undertaking because there's so many different content types. We have user profiles, we have user directories, we have group directories, we have group profiles, we have group forums, we have site-wide forums. So it's a lot more than just posts and pages that you have in WordPress. So it would be a lot of stuff, but I don't know of anybody who's created that kind of thing. But I would say that if your client already has a favorite theme framework, then you should go ahead and work with it. But you said that PageLines wasn't working well with BuddyPress in particular, or just?
Kind of a headache, like the activity stream, and then they're stopping developing the current PageLines.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like stuck there.
Pageline has there's a Pageline plugin that integrates Pageline with BuddyPress.
Yeah, but it's out of date.
Well, everything.
So I can't get WordPress. WordPress is stuck on like 3.5.
Everything, but they discontinued the old Pageline. They
Yes,
just replaced it.
Yes, I'm like end of life.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I can't help you with that particular issue, but the, yeah, I guess I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't really know of anything good. I think you should make your decision independent of BuddyPress, and then make BuddyPress work with it. Because BuddyPress, it should be pretty easy to make BuddyPress work inside of any of these things. It just won't have any BuddyPress specific functionality in terms of the theme panels and stuff like that. But yeah, good luck. That sounds like a sticky situation you're in. Yeah, you had your hand up, please.
So I had a client that asked me for, he wanted to build a website for amateur baseball players. Mm-hmm. Sign in, have all of their physical and baseball playing conditions. And then he wanted coaches to be able to search based on all of this, attributes of this, that each people got in. So the question was, that I couldn't answer that by that time, was what are the search capabilities of
Great, that's a great question. It's a little bit, this is an underdeveloped area for BuddyPress. Profile data in particular, we are stored in a set of database tables that are well designed for certain things, but they're not very well designed to do very specific kinds of searches. So let's say you're looking for baseball players that play either shortstop or third base and are between 5'11" and 6'3" and are either from Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic, and those kinds of searches are difficult to do just because the way that the BuddyPress data is stored will sort of make those searches hard to do at very, very large scales. Now, the tools also don't really exist. I wrote a plugin, it's kind of experimental, you can look it up on GitHub, called BP Better Directories. And what this does is something kind of similar. It lets you put a set of filters along the side of a directory. So have you ever used like newegg.com? Or there are a lot of these websites where you're looking at a bunch of products and then you check a box on the left-hand side that says, I only want to see things between $30 and $50, and then a bunch of them disappear. So I wrote something similar to that for BuddyPress. It's a little bit flaky, but it shows that it's possible, and the techniques that I use in the code are definitely applicable to the kind of thing that you're talking about. Now, all of that being said, this is true for BuddyPress as well as WordPress. BuddyPress and WordPress are built to display content. If you want real search, and if you're going to be building something for, if you're going to be building something that needs to scale, and if you're going to be building something for large numbers of users, and that really needs to deliver very specific, faceted results, you probably want to use a real search solution. You probably want to use something like, what are some of the, like Fedora or Sphinx, or all these separate Solar search. What's that? Well, you can use WordPress for storing your data itself, but the WordPress search itself basically looks like select from this table where this field is like this. It's like the simplest search, and it's not very smart. These other systems have all sorts of like a real piece of search software will let you, let's say, give a specific kind of weighting to one kind of search result over another one, or it will learn which are the correct search results over time. It'll be able to index enormous amounts of information and deliver them back very quickly. And these systems can exist alongside something like WordPress. And there are plugins that exist out there that are in the repository for syncing data from a WordPress installation into, let's say, a Solar installation. And then you can use a WordPress front end in order to ping and search all of that data. And they kind of, from the user's point of view, they don't really know it's separate, but from the point of view, technically, you're actually using a different application to do the searching. Now, BuddyPress, I don't know of anybody who's written BuddyPress integration for those sorts of things yet, but it certainly could be done. So I'm giving you a very long answer to what might have been actually a very short question. I mean, to build something today, the tools probably don't exist to just go throw something up in a couple of hours. You would have to do a little bit of development. And down the road, if you wanted to build something that was really, really big, you would want to look into one of these sort of external search solutions that would help you to index the content inside of BuddyPress and then to query it in a good way. So.
What's the name of that plugin that you wrote?
BP Better Directories. It's a little bit hackish and it's a little bit out of date. And it's something that I would like to implement better in BuddyPress itself, but there are some sort of technical limitations and reasons why we can't do it immediately. So, yeah, back there in the chair. I think you had a question, please. Yes, you. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I think an elementary question, but I'm wondering how you set up your development environment. Like, I know you have a GitHub account, do you use WP and like any recommendations, such as WP or hosting services for like a developer who's just working on side projects to set up the environment and test it out and deploy relatively easily?
Yeah, I'm not the best person to ask about that because I often work with universities, and universities generally host in-house. So I don't have a ton of experience with looking at different kinds of hosts. Now, as far as development goes, I do all of my development locally, and then I use Git for deployments. And so I have a pretty basic setup for deployment where I just do Git pushes and stuff like that. But you can have complex stuff like Capistrano is a Ruby app that will let you do all sorts of deployment tasks with by writing a little script. I know that of the hosting services, of the WordPress specific hosting services, I think that WP Engine is the most friendly to BuddyPress. I think the other ones like Pagely and ZippyKid and maybe others, I think they will work with BuddyPress in some cases, but I think WP Engine really likes BuddyPress and they have people on their staff who will help you with BuddyPress, and they're happy to optimize for BuddyPress. So if you're going to go with one of the WordPress specific hosts, I would suggest them. But I haven't used them a lot. I know that as far as deployment and stuff, they allow deployment with Git, but it's not like a standard setup. They don't give you shell access. You can't SSH to your server with WP Engine, by default at least. You just push to an endpoint. So it's a little bit of a sort of non-standard setup, at least from my point of view. So I can't really recommend it or not recommend it because I haven't used it very much. But I feel like I'm answering your question. I feel like there was like 3 different questions in there. Does that make sense? I mean,
that answered it. Okay, yeah.
Okay, thanks. We can talk more about it later too if you have more specific questions. Yes, please.
Yeah, real vague note, BuddyPress and Multisite. Can we just explore that a little bit?
Sure.
I have it. I don't know, potential project is more like a franchise thing, which strikes me as Multisite.
Yeah.
But then they want a social interaction as well, so that strikes me as BuddyPress. I'm having trouble bringing the 2 things together.
Good. Well, it's complicated. BuddyPress and Multisite have a torrid history together. It's not that bad. But so the way that it works, so conceptually speaking, the way that it works out of the box is that there's a 2-way relationship. You have one set of BuddyPress data that spans the entire network.
So that would be on one site.
And the content is displayed on a single site. So you choose one blog on the site, let's say community.example.com, or maybe it's your main site or whatever. That will be the we call it the BP root blog. That's the blog where everything is displayed. That's where your URLs for like your profile will be on community.example.com/member/boot or whatever. But that works for all sites in the sense that then when you create a new site, let's say, foo.example.com, that information, Boone created a new site, is going to get beamed back to the main site's activity stream. And everything is aggregated in that one place. So in other words, all social interaction happens on the one root blog, while people can go set up multi-site in whatever way they want to. Now, BuddyPress has a couple of tools built in to sort of bring together because WordPress multi-site, especially if you're using something like domain mapping, you can't really, these sites have no relationship with each other, right? Except for shared logins, they don't really have anything to do with each other, shared plugins too. But with BuddyPress, we have a sites directory on the main site. So when you're on the main blog, there's a directory of all the sites. there is also under each user's profile, there will be a tab that says My Sites. And you can look at a list of all of the blogs where I'm an author. So again, it's sitting on top of Multisite in this sense. And it's sort of aggregating information about Multisite. Multisite still works just the same way that it would without BuddyPress. It's just that BuddyPress sort of provides, it's a tie that binds all of these sites together and provides a sort of central place for viewing lists of blogs and viewing associations with blogs. And it gives you a nice interface for creating blogs. Now the important thing for your point of view here is that, again, we're talking about this is one set of BuddyPress data for the entire network. So a user will have one single profile for the whole network. So even if they're a member of more than one different franchise or more than one different site, when it comes to the social aspect, they're only going to have one single profile. So that's the way that it works out of the box. So it sounds like it's actually going to work. The way that it does work is the way that you want it to work, if I'm understanding it correctly. It's possible to make it work in other ways, so that, for instance, you would have your BuddyPress community on this site would be unrelated to your BuddyPress community on this other site, but that's much harder to do.
It's actually, they want that foundation.
Great.
It's more like you could have a franchise in 3 consecutive towns and not necessarily lock someone down to saying, oh, go to this site, whereas you join the community and you can say, oh, it's almost like a Meetup type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that BuddyPress is exactly what you want. The way that it works out of the box with Multisite is exactly what you want in this case.
But because you showed that one screen with the 2 different kind of like profile versions, could you just go with BuddyPress and kind of have like levels, tiers of users? In other words, here's a franchisee, here's a subscriber.
Right. So this is more of what you're asking is more a question about Multisite than it is about BuddyPress. Should you use Multisite? Here, generally, you shouldn't use Multisite. I mean, look, Multisite's great. I use Multisite on most of my projects. You only need to use Multisite if users need to have access to their own themes and plugins, and if they need to be able to manage like who's an author and an editor and stuff like that on their own sites.
I think Multisite's an admin tool more than it's an insight tool.
Yeah.
It eases administration more than anything.
I think that's one way of looking at it. If all you want is for users to be able to, if you want to be able to separate users into different interest groups and stuff like that, BuddyPress groups are really that tool. That's what it's really meant to do. It's much less customizable by the user. All groups in BuddyPress look pretty much the same, for instance, as opposed to on a WordPress multi-site installation where each site could have a radically different theme and could have a different URL, and they could be totally separate for most intents and purposes.
It's more that identification thing that I'm interested in.
Right.
Hey, these are, somehow, differentiate franchisees, let's say, from normal users.
Yeah.
Although the interaction would be very similar,
right.
I would be able to recognize, like, hey, you're the head of that franchise, but you're still just a participant in the community.
Right. What I would recommend is get a development installation of WordPress. Don't do multi-site yet. Set up BuddyPress. Play with the group feature and see if you can kind of superimpose your purposes onto the way that groups already work in BuddyPress. If so, don't even think about multi-site anymore, because multi-site may be overkill for the thing that you're talking about. Yeah. So start with BuddyPress on a single installation of WordPress and see where that leads you. Another question. We have a repeat question in the back there. Yes, please. With my CUNY brethren.
You had also developed a privacy plugin. I think it was from BuddyPress.
That wasn't me.
That wasn't you?
No. Well, can you continue to ask your question? Or it sounded more like an accusation, right?
I thought it was you. I've been one of the other comments in a box people.
Yeah.
To work with the BuddyPress. I was just wondering if there were any changes being made to it.
Privacy is complicated. It's complicated technically because there's so many different kinds of data and so many different kinds of users, but it's also complicated just conceptually to like, because in a system like BuddyPress where you have blogs, and you may want your blog to be public, but you may want the associated group to be private, and you may want pieces of that group to become public or visible only to members of the site, but you may want other things only to be available to your friends, and so on and so forth. So it's very complicated. There is no sort of, to my knowledge, there is no single solution for all of this that exists for BuddyPress. Built into BuddyPress itself, we have group privacy levels, so you can make groups private and hidden. And then all of the content that's inside of the groups will be private and hidden. So any plugins that you're using with a group, they will inherit the privacy settings of the group. We also have privacy settings for profiles. So for profile fields in particular. So for any given profile field, let's say you have a field for phone number, but you don't want just anybody seeing your phone number. It's possible to say, I only want this to be visible to logged in users. And that can be configured either at the administrator level, or it can be configured at the individual user level. Like they can make the decision if they want to on the front end. So that already exists, and that's built into BuddyPress. There are also some plugins out there that do some kind of manipulation of the activity stream to remove items that certain users shouldn't be seeing. There is an old plugin that was sort of vaporware is a little too strong a word, but it was written and then it was kind of abandoned in beta that did a more sort of substantial job with privacy, but to my knowledge it isn't really working right now. And actually, maybe what you're thinking of is that Ray, who is another developer for BuddyPress and for Commons in a Box, recently updated that plugin so that it would work with the most recent versions of BuddyPress. So I think it's just called BP Privacy. Is that right, Paul? Yeah, Jeff Sayer's old plugin. Ray updated it, and it works now. But your mileage may vary. I haven't tested that, and I don't know how it works. So it's something with each release that we're trying to do it right by sort of implementing pieces that are small enough that they can be managed in each release. But it's something we're working on. What time is it getting to be, Steve?
Yeah, last question.
We'll do one more question?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
How are you? Got a question. I have a site. I'm not a developer. I'm like the end user. I'm like the owner of the company. I have, we use BuddyPress, and we use it for doctors. Doctors talk to one another, they socialize, or whatever. I have an issue where it was working where you tab onto members, and then the members would come up. Each member, they put their profile, they call it an avatar. It would be nice if they just said, put your picture there, whatever. When you click on the member, it should go to their profile, which lists all their information. It was working for me, and now it doesn't. I don't know at this point if
Well, can I come to a laying on of hands, because that's usually how I solve these technical issues. I don't know. I mean, my question is, do you take the plugin out and then reinstall it, or to fix it? Or? Yeah, I mean, so when you're doing these kinds of debugging things, the first thing you want to do is start deactivating plugins. So just go into your list of plugins, the ones that you most recently updated, deactivate it, see if it works. Deactivate the next one that seems like it might be related, see if it works. By process of elimination, hopefully you find it that way. So it could be like a glitch. It could be a glitch somewhere. I mean, the thing about these kinds of systems, when you're using BuddyPress on top of WordPress and a custom theme, and you're using a bunch of plugins on top of BuddyPress and so on and so forth, a lot of moving parts, right? And so if one of them gets out of whack, then it's a problem. Could it fix itself if I update, because it's 1.71, I think it says. It's possible, yeah. If you update to the latest BuddyPress, it is possible that it will work. I recommend that you do this in a development environment or a staging environment or something, and not just do it on your live site so that everything breaks. But yeah, but deactivating plugins is really your first step for debugging this kind of thing. All right. Well, thanks everybody.